In 1998, one name dominated every front page, every late-night monologue, every water-cooler conversation in America: Monica Lewinsky. She was 24 years old, and overnight, she became one of the most recognized and most ridiculed women on the planet. Today, more than a quarter century later, she's still a public figure, but for very different reasons. So, what actually happened to her life, and what is she worth now? The real answer is a lot less flashy than the internet rumors suggest, and honestly, that's exactly what makes her story interesting. Monica Lewinsky was born on July 23, 1973 in San Francisco, California, and raised in Beverly Hills. Her father, Bernard Lewinsky, was an oncologist whose own family had fled Nazi persecution in the 1920s, eventually settling in the United States after years in El Salvador. Her mother, Marcia, came from an equally layered background: Lithuanian and Russian Jewish heritage stretching back through China, where Monica's grandmother had been born in British-controlled Tianjin. Growing up, Monica had access to the kind of comfort most teenagers only see in movies: private schools, expensive lessons, a home in one of the wealthiest zip codes in the country. But comfort didn't mean stability. Her parents' marriage collapsed when she was 14, and the divorce was bitter and public within their own social circle. Those years left a mark. Monica later spoke about the emotional toll of that period, describing a household where honesty had become complicated long before Washington ever entered the picture. She eventually enrolled at Lewis U. Clark College in Portland, Oregon, where she studied psychology, a subject she has said fascinated her because of her interest in people, behavior, and the ways relationships shape identity. She graduated in 1995. Years later, after the scandal had already reshaped her life, she went back to school, earning a master's degree in social psychology from the London School of Economics in 2006, a period she has described as one of the few times she felt genuinely anonymous, studying in a country where her name didn't trigger instant recognition the way it did at home. It's easy to forget, amid all the headlines about Monica herself, that her entire family was pulled into the scandal alongside her. Her father, Bernard, gave rare live interviews during the investigation, defending his daughter and describing the financial and emotional toll of facing an aggressive independent counsel and constant media surveillance outside their home. Her mother, Marcia, who had remarried media executive Ronald Strauss in 1998, stayed by Monica's side throughout the worst of it, reportedly sleeping in her room and refusing to leave her alone during the periods when the family feared she might not be able to cope with the pressure. Whatever else can be said about the chaos of that period, Monica has consistently credited her family's presence as one of the reasons she made it through. That same year, Monica landed an unpaid internship at the White House, working in the office of Chief of Staff Leon Panetta. It was, by all accounts, an unremarkable entry-level job until a government shutdown in November 1995 sent most paid staff home and left a skeleton crew of interns to keep the West Wing running. Monica was one of them. What followed was a relationship with President Bill Clinton that would eventually become public knowledge to the entire world. The affair stretched over roughly a year and a half, and when news of it broke in January 1998 through the Drudge Report, it triggered a chain of events that led to Clinton's impeachment, a national reckoning over presidential conduct, and a level of personal exposure that Monica Lewinsky was, by her own account, never prepared for. She has since described that period bluntly: cameras outside her apartment, comedians mocking her nightly, and a media environment with no precedent for what she was going through. This was the early internet age. Social media didn't exist yet, but she has called herself patient zero of online-style public shaming, because the humiliation moved faster and reached further than anything the culture had seen before. Here's where a lot of the internet rumors get it wrong. Yes, Monica Lewinsky made real money in the years right after the scandal. Her 1999 memoir, Monica's Story, written with royal biographer Andrew Morton, reportedly earned her around $500,000 and became a bestseller. A televised interview with Barbara Walters, watched by roughly 70 million people, brought in about $1 million, largely from international broadcast rights. But sudden money from a scandal doesn't behave like a career. A $1 million endorsement deal with Jenny Craig in 2000 fell apart under public backlash and was pulled after just a few months, leaving her with a fraction of what was promised. A handbag line she designed and personally oversaw, sold in boutiques like Henri Bendel and Fred Siegel, generated buzz but never became a lasting business. A Fox reality dating show she hosted in 2003 lasted only 5 episodes. For a long stretch afterward, Monica has said she struggled to find steady employment at all. Many companies were reportedly hesitant to hire someone whose name still triggered instant recognition and controversy. It wasn't until years later that she found a more durable path forward. The real turning point came in 2014 when Monica wrote a widely discussed personal essay in Vanity Fair titled Shame and Survival, breaking roughly a decade of public silence. She has said she was moved to speak out partly after learning about the suicide of Tyler Clementi, a college student who died after being publicly humiliated online, a case that echoed, in her mind, what she herself had survived years earlier. In the essay, she described the process ahead of her as taking back my narrative and giving a purpose to my past. It wasn't framed as a comeback attempt. It read more like someone finally deciding to stop letting other people write the ending of her story. That essay opened the door to a new chapter that had almost nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the psychology of public humiliation, a subject she was, unfortunately, more qualified to speak on than almost anyone alive. In 2015, she delivered a TED Talk titled The Price of Shame, recorded in Vancouver in front of a live audience that didn't quite know what to expect from her. In it, she reframed her own story not as a punchline, but as an early case study in what public humiliation does to a person and what a culture obsessed with judgment and virality was doing to countless ordinary people who never had her name recognition to fall back on. She described herself, memorably, as patient zero of a form of online shaming that didn't yet have a name in 1998, because the tools for its social media, comment sections, algorithmic outrage, hadn't been invented yet. The talk has since been viewed tens of millions of times and is widely credited with repositioning her in the public eye, from tabloid punchline to someone with genuine authority on a subject the internet was only beginning to reckon with. The reaction wasn't universally kind. Even after the TED Talk, she faced fresh waves of online harassment, trolling on social media, cruel comments tying her back to unrelated national events, the same reflexive mockery that had defined the 1990s coverage of her. But this time, there was also a different kind of response building alongside it. Journalists, psychologists, and researchers studying online harassment began citing her talk as an early, credible account of what it actually feels like to be the target of mass public shaming, years before cancel culture became a common phrase. From there, Monica leaned further into advocacy work. She became a strategic advisor and ambassador for Bystander Revolution, an anti-bullying organization that promotes practical, everyday actions people can take to interrupt cyberbullying rather than simply condemning it after the fact. Through that role, she helped launch Month of Action, an October anti-bullying campaign that partnered with groups including GLAAD, Common Sense Media, and the Crisis Text Line, alongside celebrity supporters like Michael J. Fox, Olivia Wilde, and Jamie Lee Curtis. She also became an anti-bullying ambassador for the UK-based Diana Award. In interviews tied to that work, she urged people who were being bullied not to suffer in silence, and encouraged bystanders to become what she called upstanders, people willing to speak up in the moment rather than watch quietly from the sidelines. Alongside the advocacy work, she wrote essays for outlets like Vanity Fair on subjects ranging from public shaming to the Junghao Me Too movement, revisiting her own history with a more critical eye toward the power imbalance at the center of her relationship with Clinton, something she had rarely been allowed to say publicly in the late 1990s without being dismissed. The next major chapter of her career came through television, and it was arguably the boldest move of all, agreeing to help produce a dramatized version of her own scandal, Impeachment: American Crime Story. The FX anthology series from Ryan Murphy retold the Clinton-Lewinsky story through the perspective of the women involved: Monica, Linda Tripp, and Paula Jones rather than centering the presidency itself. Murphy reportedly pursued her for years before she agreed to participate, eventually promising her a producer credit, creative input on the scripts, and a broader development deal through her production company. That company, Alt Ending Productions, signed a first-look deal with 20th Television, the studio behind shows like The Simpsons and This Is Us, a notable vote of confidence from a major studio in her ability to develop and produce content beyond her own story. On impeachment, she worked directly with the show's writers and fellow executive producers, including actress Sarah Paulson, who played Linda Tripp, and with whom Lewinsky developed a close working relationship over the course of production. Beanie Feldstein, who portrayed Monica on screen, has spoken about feeling a deep responsibility to portray her with more nuance than the culture had ever extended to the real woman, at one point telling Lewinsky directly that she saw her role as protecting her. Producing the show wasn't easy for Lewinsky emotionally. She's described watching certain scenes, particularly ones dramatizing her fractured relationship with Linda Tripp, as genuinely triggering to watch, even while she understood she needed to engage with the material as a producer rather than simply as the person who lived it. She's also been candid that she doesn't take on projects connected to her own past lightly, given how many lucrative offers she's turned down over the years, specifically because they felt exploitative rather than honest. Beyond impeachment, she co-produced 15 Minutes of Shame, an HBO Max documentary examining the broader culture of public humiliation, viral shaming, and cancel culture, a natural extension of the advocacy work she'd already been doing for years. And in February 2025, she launched Reclaiming with Monica Lewinsky, a podcast in which she interviews guests including actors, athletes, and public figures who've weathered their own experiences of public scrutiny about what it actually takes to rebuild a life and a sense of self after a defining public humiliation. On the show, she's spoken with unusual candor about her own experience in the White House, including admitting that at the time, she genuinely believed there might be a future with Clinton, a belief she now views with the clarity of hindsight rather than justification. Between the scandal and her re-emergence in 2014, rarely makes it into there's a stretch of Monica, roughly a decade, where she has said she simply could not get hired. She's described applying for jobs around 2007, years after the scandal, well into an entirely different presidential era, and being turned away from interviews outright because of her name alone. At one point, she said, prospective employers wanted her to produce a kind of letter of indemnity from the Clintons before they'd even consider her, largely because Hillary Clinton was widely expected to run for president and companies didn't want to be seen as having hired the woman at the center of her husband's impeachment. It's a detail that rarely gets attention next to the headline-grabbing book deals and TV interviews, but it says a lot about what those years actually looked like for her financially, not glamorous, and not especially lucrative. It was, by her own account, a long period of being unofficially unemployable. That's part of what makes the 2014 essay and the years that followed feel less like a comeback in the celebrity sense and more like someone finally being allowed back into ordinary working life. By 2025, Monica had become comfortable revisiting her own story on her own terms, something that would have been almost unthinkable in the years right after the scandal. In February 2025, she appeared on Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy, one of the most listened-to podcasts in the world, in an episode framed explicitly around reclaiming her side of events. The response was notably warm. Lewinsky later said she wanted to use the platform to help open a path for other women in media, praising Cooper directly for building a business on her own terms in an industry historically dominated by men. In that same conversation, she offered one of her more pointed reflections on the scandal itself, saying she believed Clinton should have simply told the public it was a private matter and resigned, or found another way to stay in office that didn't involve lying and didn't involve, in her words, throwing a young person just starting out in the world under the bus. It's a line that captures something central to how she talks about the scandal, now not erasing her own role in it, but being far more willing than she once was to name the power imbalance that shaped it. This is where the clickbait headlines really go off the rails. Some viral posts have claimed Monica Lewinsky is sitting on a $50 million fortune, tied to elaborate real estate portfolios and investment income. That figure traces back to a single promotional article tied to gold investment marketing, not a credible financial source, and it doesn't hold up against any mainstream reporting on her finances. The more consistently reported figure, cited by outlets that track celebrity finances, puts her net worth somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million as of 2025. That's built from a mix of sources: royalties from her memoir, speaking fees that reportedly run around $60,000 per engagement, production income from her TV and podcast work, and the lingering earnings from those early 2000s media deals. It's worth sitting with that number for a second because it says something real about her story. Monica Lewinsky turned down more than $10 million in offers over the years for interviews and projects that she felt didn't align with how she wanted to tell her own story. That's not the decision of someone chasing the biggest possible payday. It's someone choosing control and credibility over quick cash, even when the quick cash was enormous. The shock isn't a hidden fortune, it's that a woman who was, by her own description, arguably the most humiliated person in the world at 24, spent the next 3 decades rebuilding a life on her own terms as a writer, a producer, and an advocate without needing a 9-figure net worth to prove she'd made it. At 51, Monica Lewinsky isn't defined by a number in a bank account. She's defined by the fact that she's still standing, still working, and still telling her own story instead of letting anyone else tell it for her. As she put it herself, she couldn't run away from what happened to her. She had to integrate it, and whatever her exact bank balance is today, that's the part of the story that actually holds up to scrutiny.